Welcome, I'm Catherine Magana here with Steve Wolf, Greg Carroll, and Rachel Ivanovich, where we're here to share with you top retirement planning mistakes. So it doesn't matter what age you're at, we definitely think having retirement in mind and planning for retirement is important. But one of the mistakes that we come across is not starting early enough. And so if you are starting a little bit later, obviously we want you to continue to save, but the reality is if you start early, you have more time to save and invest. And talked about in the past where we're living longer. People are living till 85, 90, 100 years old. And with modern medicine these days, you should have enough money to last. And, looking at your plan and looking at when you want to retire and factoring in, how much, do I need to save and have that so I have enough to live.
I read a statistic that 20-year-olds today, the average 20-year-old will live to 100.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's more than that with AI today. They're coming up with cures and coming up with at 20 and 30 and 50 times faster.
Longevity is going to be a big problem.
Yep.
Right. And the secret to making a lot of money is really compounding interest. If you have a stock and you have dividends, and especially if you're young and you start off when you're 20 years old, and just let those dividends compound, where you reinvest the dividends in the company and then you get dividends on top of dividends. By the time you are ready to retire, you'll have a lot, even if you just do that with a CD, with anything, really, just compounding of that effect. Mathematically, if you do it, you'll realize you start at 20, you're in good shape.
I think Einstein called it the eighth wonder of the world. It was the power of compound interest.
Compound interest, yes.
That probably is true. And I was reading something about Warren Buffett, and he has made the majority of his money in about the last 15 years of his life, and he's 90-something years old. And that's because that compounding effect. Just do the math.
I remember when I started in the business, 30 years ago, and they always showed this IRA calculator. If you started when, early and one person started late, well, I had an updated version I saw online the other day that, a 19-year-old saving $2,000 a year for just 8 years and compounding that at 10%. That's a healthy return, but 10% until they're age 65, they'll have $1 million.
Isn't that fantastic?
That's just $16,000 out of your pocket. But if you waited till you were 27 and you saved $2,000 a year every year until you're 65, or for another 38 years, compounding at 10%, you have about $800,000. So you saved way more money and had a lot less.
I think
$200,000 less.
I think it's really key for parents to be talking to their teenagers about money and about IRAs, Roth IRAs, traditional IRAs, because as soon as they get a job, they can contribute every year to a Roth or a traditional IRA. You have to have earned income to be able to fund the IRA.
Yep.
It's interesting. We have a client that they been putting some money away for her. She just finished college and is out now working full time. And so now they stopped putting money away for her, and now she's putting the money away. But she has that mindset, she has that money mindset of, okay, I'm going to put this. We talked about how much to put away, and it's interesting. She's in her 20s, and when you're young, you have a lot of time, and so she's willing. And she we went over investing. She understands the risk, when you have a long period of time for the money to last, we're more growth and aggressive growth oriented for her. So I think if you start early, your money can work for you. But then we look at kind of in your 30s. I mean, usually maybe you want to have a family or a house, and then you also need to continue to save for your retirement. But you also may have some other goals that you're trying to accomplish. And then usually in your 40s, you're kind of in your accumulation phase and saving and investing. And then 50s come along, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, retirement might be knocking on my door, but not quite yet, but it's coming.
You definitely feel it.
Yeah, and then your kids might be out of college by then, and so you're kind of seeing that retirement is coming down the way. And then we have those kind of 50s to 60-year-olds, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, do I have enough?
Serious.
Yeah, do I have enough money?
Yeah, they've saved for everything else, like you say, the colleges and the houses and all that stuff. And then, they're 50, and they're, wow, I've got nothing saved for retirement. And now you've got a huge uphill battle.
Yeah, so if you start late, then you have to look at, okay, I might have to work a little longer,
right,
or, or how much do I need to live on? And then you have to look at, there are ways you could save a little bit more with some of the catch-ups. There's catch-up in 401ks and IRAs and Roth if you qualify. So it's, if you didn't start in your 20s, and we say start now, but if you did start, or if you did start late, make sure that you're aggressively putting money away. And even if in your 60s, hopefully by then you kind of put some money aside, but it is important to look at, do I need to save a little more, or am I at a good place? Because we want your money to last, and we want you to have enough to live through retirement.
And as you're doing that, I think, being a great role model for your children and grandchildren, even asking them when you're at, I don't know, at Starbucks, and then would you like to own a piece of this? And then really teach them about the stock market and how it works and why investing is important. And my son and I, when he was 15 years old, he was really interested in stocks and how that worked. So we opened up an account together, and he put all of his allowance in there. And so he would, as he would accumulate some, then he would invest. And so he's even doing that now in his 20s. So it's never too early to start.
Right. And it doesn't just have to be in stocks. It can be in anything that will compound. So a lot of times the reason we use stocks is because historically, it's compounded at a pretty good rate. But even at, if you can get CDs or treasuries at 6%, 5%, something like that, and just compound it, and you start early enough, you'll still have a lot of money at the end of the day. Now, the only problem you have to remember is that inflation happens. Okay, so yes, you can compound your money, but it may only keep up with inflation if it does that. Okay, and one of the reasons that we like to mix up the investments is because of that. So you don't just want to have a CD.
Correct.
Or
As I say, a couple years ago, I think CDs were lower than inflation, so it's not uncommon
Way
for
lower.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So right now we're just in this interesting time where the short-term rates are.
I think
high.
if teaching kids to start saving early, and they see their money working for them, they get excited
They get
about it.
so
They kind of get
excited.
addicted to it too, and then it's a habit, and then they will never stop saving. They're always going to keep saving money, letting the money work as hard as they are for what they're earning. So I think the earlier they can start, it's powerful.
Well, the companies and that's why I brought up stocks, is it made it real for my son in terms of, okay, you love video games, okay, GameStop, or you love going to Disneyland, Disney. So really that makes it real for them. But I think that you're absolutely right, Greg, in that if they can watch their money grow, it becomes kind of addictive in a game and watch, every time he'd get his allowance, he'd be like, okay, what can I buy now? So, and he would invest his money, and that was a purchase for him, but he was really excited about it. But let's talk about, okay, well, what if you haven't saved? Because I have a lot of clients that, they are in their 50s, or, they're kind of feeling and smelling retirement 15, 20 years on the horizon. And like you said, there are catch-ups available, but what else can you do? And I think really looking at your budget and what can I maybe cut out for a while so that later I will have accumulated enough so that I can really enjoy my retirement.
Okay, and you mentioned Disney, and that may or may not be a good thing to do. But I think your point isn't so much about the individual company.
Not at all. It's truly just getting him excited
it.
about.
Right.
There definitely weren't recommendations. I was just getting
Right.
my
But-
son excited about.
But I think
things.
if you get them involved with companies that they know of,
Correct. Yes.
and they can actually go in there and say, "Hey, I
Hey,
own
I'm
part
an
of
owner.
this."
Yes, that was fun for him.
I think it'd be fun for anybody, and that's probably a pretty decent way to invest. Hey, it's something that everybody is doing or going to or something. Who knows? I mean, maybe 30, 40 years down the road. I'll tell you what. You talk about compounding. I had a client who. I'm sure most of us know who Sara Lee is. I don't even know if it used to be a
that a
public
cake?
company. But I don't think it's even public.
Dessert, yeah.
But they were one of the original owners of Sara Lee. I'll never forget this because one day this person comes into our office and he kind of looked like he was homeless, carrying these paper bags, like grocery bags. And I'm thinking, oh my God, who's this? And it so happened that he was just looking for an advisor. So I was chosen, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, okay, here's a waste of time. And he sits down, and I say, so what can I do for you? And he opens up this bag, and he's got these certificates of Sara Lee that were probably worth $17, $18 million.
Wow.
In a paper bag.
In a paper bag. So the first thing
fantastic.
I said was, get it out of that paper bag and put it in where it's safe. But the thing is, though, is that he never sold. He just let it compound and let it compound and let it compound. and he became a multimillionaire.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are a lot of other stories like that. So again, bottom line with this is that start as young as you possibly can, put money away and
Teach
let
your
it
kids.
compound,
Correct.
teach your children, and you should do great.
And then also another thing is, if you are employed and you have part of a 401k or retirement plan, is there a match? And if there is a match, are you maximizing at least to get that full match? Because I can't tell you, I see it all the time that, I think it's a 3% match. It's actually up to 5% if you put in 6%, and so you have to look at those numbers. And is there free money out there for you? So once again, every situation is different, but make sure that if you do have access to a plan, that you're putting at least the match in.
And for self-employed people, there are plans available as well. I have a lot of clients that don't even realize that maybe they've left corporate and they've started their own business, and then they want to know, okay, well, what is there for me?
Yeah.
And so there are multiple options if you're self-employed. And if you're a sole proprietor and your kids are under age 18, you can pay your kids, and you don't have to pay Social Security and Medicare for them. And then you can teach them about IRAs. And so there are SEP IRAs, simplified employer pensions out there. There are solo 401ks or individual 401ks, simple plans. There are a lot of plans available for self-employed individuals.
Okay, well, again, bottom line, start early, start often.
Please stay tuned for important regulatory disclosures. The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results. Any indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. As always, please remember investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional. Wolf Weezy Magana, LLC, doing business as WWM Financial, Savvy Doc Financial Planners, and Savvy Woman Wealth Management, is a registered investment advisor with the SEC.